counting of those ballots.
Right.
So I want to take a second here to clarify some misinformation that Trump has given people for quite some time. Trump talks about absentee ballots, right? Those are the good ballots. We trust absentee ballots. It's the mail-in ballots that are the bad ballots that are all fraudulent. People, there is no difference between absentee ballots and mail-in ballots. They are processed the exact same way. It's that simple. And
tomatoes and tomatoes.
It is literally tomatoes and tomatoes. And the Electoral Commission...
Potatoes.
The Commissioner of the Electoral System, the coalition, has stated that every state is allowed to call them whatever they want to call them.
Sure.
People, there's multiple different names they're used. They're vote by mail, mail-in ballots, universal mail-in ballots, absentee ballots. These are all different names, and every state uses a different name. Now, for the record, I would like to point out that Donald Trump votes in the state of Florida because that is his permanent residence.
And a swing state, by the way.
And a swing state. Now, if you go to the Florida Department of State on their state website, if you go into their election section, you will find that Florida calls their ballots vote by mail. They are not called absentee ballots, which is Trump's precious, perfect ballots that are nothing but truth.
Terminology.
Yes. So, for the record, Trump voted by a vote by mail ballot, not an absentee ballot. So, and this is the terminology that Florida uses. So again, Trump has been talking about the absentee ballots, so has his press secretary, how Florida has the safest absentee ballots process, all this, but they don't even actually use that terminology in the state of Florida. They call them vote by mail. So again, depending on what state you are, they will call them absentee, they will call them vote by mail, mail-in, whatever, but they are all the same thing. Now the difference is on the states where Trump likes to say universal ballots, mail-in ballots, these are states that automatically mail out the ballots to all their registered voters. That is the only difference. The other states, the person has to request to have an absentee or a mail by vote ballot sent to them. That is the only difference, but the process for counting these ballots, no matter whether it says absentee or vote by mail, mail-in ballots, it is all the same thing. Trump has created this division to create doubt and to be able to further his narrative that mail-in ballots are fraudulent, but people, they are the same exact thing.
I've actually heard him in the context of Pennsylvania now, or his party, use both terms for different areas of the state.
Right.
What is interesting to me is that particularly mail-in ballots seem to be areas where people of color seem to reside, right?
Yes,
and so it seems very interesting to me how the terminology is really used.
Right. Look, there's been so many claims by Trump on the ballots being fraudulent. This is one of the things he's really built this year on to be able to declare this election a fraud. But the reality is all these ballots are the same. They're essentially all absentee ballots because the definition of absentee ballots means absent from the polls. That is where the term came from. So anybody who is absent from the polls, their ballot is an absentee ballot. So Trump's claim is completely false. There is no difference between absentee ballot and a mail-in ballot.
Sure.
They are equally the same and processed equally the same.
Just the process of delivery.
It's just the process of delivery, whether it's requested or it's just automatically sent.
So it's really, when you consider an absentee ballot, you're considering a two-step process. Basically, you're voting saying, I want to vote. And then you're saying, I'm sending my vote in.
Right. So one of Trump's claims is that, the states that send in, our state is one of them. Washington State is a state that automatically sends ballots out to all registered voters. I believe there's 9 states that does that. So his claim is, well, stacks and stacks of ballots just get sent out and people can collect these stacks of ballots, fill them out and send them in, and blah, blah, blah.
Which would be voting fraud.
Which is voting fraud. So people, look, if you get a ballot in the mail. And look, we got, your older daughter's ballot for a few years because she lived with us. So she didn't update her address. So for several years in a row, we would get her ballot too, and then we would give her ballot, The truth is, if we took her ballot and we decide, we're just going to fill it out and send it in, we would be committing a felony.
Right. Which we didn't, of course. But that is on an individual person. That is not an entire party that is committing some entire massive fraud. Right.
So if a person is dumb enough to fill out somebody else's ballot, that is on them, and they will be the ones prosecuted. And look, there's so many security measures put in place that identify these.
And I think that really what you have to look at that way is you have to look at the party itself. More specifically, you have to look at the individual pointing his finger and calling it fraud, and you have to understand that really what he's calling is a people group evil.
Yes.
He's making an assumption based on who a Democrat is, right? And certainly not the whole party is made up of people of color. That's not the case. There are people of color that are Republicans, so I don't want to say that all blacks are Democrats or anything of that nature. But what he's doing is he's clumping together what is stereotypically considered the Democrat Party, and he's basically saying the whole party is evil. Right. And so what he's assuming is that this evil agency is all conspiring together under the leadership of Democratic leadership, and they're all creating fraudulent ballots, one at a time, two at a time, 20,000 at a time, or in his case, he believes because he lost by 5 million almost, or right at 5 million, 5 million fraudulent votes so that he would be beaten. And that's just not the case, right? No. There is no conspiracy to see Trump lose. There is a mass increase in voting population that desires for there to be a new president. Now, a lot of people will get into, did you vote for Biden because of Biden's policies, or did you vote for Biden because you're against Trump? I think it's tomatoes and tomatoes, right? I think that there are some phenomenal things about Biden and Harris. I'm going to add Harris to that party because that's where my excitement and enthusiasm came from.
For sure.
First African-American Asian woman in the White House. I think that is the most exciting thing that's happened in a very long time. Right. I think it's equal to Obama, right? Your first woman real leadership. Not that other positions in Congress and the Senate aren't valuable. They certainly are. But we're talking about leadership to the world, and it's time for those things to happen because the world is different than white Anglo-Saxon male-dominant world that was first established in America, right? That would just take, call a land that they had never seen before their property, right? And say Native Americans weren't Native Americans, they were Indians, right? Now, I use that term with no disrespect in my heart. If you love that term and you're it's kind of like the N-word for us in some senses, you may embrace it wonderfully if you're a Native American population, but that's your right to embrace, not my right, right? However, when you look at it, we are a different world that's just going to be dominated by that voice. Now, there is 55% of white women who I have seen video after video of Midwestern white males saying, I'm going to vote for Trump, and my wife is too, and the wife is never even in the picture. But that's a whole different dialogue that I'm going to skip for right now, that I think America really needs to address is where did this 55% come from?
Well, they also say there's a higher probability of getting struck by lightning than for there to actually be voter fraud.
Right.
Because there are so many security measures put in place. I mean, look, people, this is the same process that elected Trump president in 2016. And he didn't have an issue with it in 2016. He was perfectly happy to accept that win. So, again, same process.
So Tiffany...